soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force. You are about to embark upon the Great Crusade.
When I was born, my name is Charles B Rowley, R-O-W-L-E-Y Jr. I was born October 14th, 1923 in Cleveland, Ohio. I was at college my freshman year when the bombs dropped on December 7th. I joined up actually in January of, I signed up in late 42, but I wasn't called up until January of 43. I started out at Maxwell Field in Alabama. Then from Maxwell Field, I went to Americus, Georgia, and I washed out of the pilot training, and they sent me to Sioux Falls, South Dakota for radio school, and then to Yuma, Arizona for gunnery school. We left out of Pease Air Base in New Hampshire, and then flew to Labrador, and then went over to Prestwick, England, where we, and then from there we were sent to Ireland, Northern Ireland, for a week. I've forgotten exactly why we went there, but anyway, we were there, and I think we were assigned to the 93rd Bomb Group at the time we departed from the States, probably on our original orders when we left the States. That was our eventual destination. That's behind the co-pilot and the flight engineer. We were both in the same position, and we alternated on the top turret gun. We weren't doing handling our other assignment. See, what we would have to do as radio operator, we'd have to wire back by Morse code to the base and give them an idea what the visibility was over the target, how we would rate it in terms of its accuracy of the bombs. Did we think it was a hit or good hit, as best as we could tell, and what the weather was like, the time we let the bombs go. So from the time we were on the IP point, the initial point, heading into the bomb target, we had to report everything really that happened during from that time until the bombs were dropped. And because they wanted to know whether you're over the primary target or the secondary target, and whether there was cloud cover or what the visibility was at the time the bombs dropped. All that information was radioed back to Hardwick.
Now, what kind of gun would you fire on the B-24?
50 caliber machine gun. We used to have to be able to assemble and disassemble them blindfold before we qualified for our gunnery certificate or whatever. Big, heavy gun. I'm sure I could never do it again. But everybody in the school, that was part of the final exam, you might say, was to take apart and put together a 50 caliber machine gun.
How did you guys train for shooting?
Well, we had a gunnery, we had two things. First, on the land, in Yuma, Arizona, there was a big racetrack, like a racetrack, and they had skeet around the racetrack shooting out birds, and we'd shoot from the back of the truck at different angles at these birds, these skeet birds. And then after that, we went up in actual planes and had air-to-air gunnery where a plane would, there'd be a tow target, and we would fire the guns out of the waist at the tow target, and that was our air-to-air gunnery practice. Pilot was, I think, 24 years old. I was 19, and the other members of the crew were approximately my age. Pardo was the engineer, P-A-R-D-O-E. The pilot was Carol Berner, B-E-R-N-E-R. And the waist gunners, one was named Knapp, K-N-A-P-P, and the other was Greenless, G-R-E-E-N-L-E-S, I guess. And the tail gunner was a Pinette, P-I-N-E-T-T-E. We used to call him Frenchie. That was his nickname, little guy. And I forgot the co-pilot, who was Tony Piesnikowski. He was an ex-truck driver from New York. who didn't get along with the pilot too well, and the navigator was Oswald T. von Weyerhaeusen from Hollywood, and the bombardier came out of Chicago, and his name was Benares, Benaris. I never saw any of them after we finished our missions. We flew different planes, but Sleepy Time Gal was the one that you see here. Probably we flew the most missions in that particular plane. You see the 24 today, do you wonder how you got in there with all the equipment you had on and everything else? It was amazing what you had to wear when you started out. But you'd start up, just to give you an idea, you'd start up in the morning like with long underwear on. Then you'd get on, you had a flight suit with pockets in the below the knees, and then after you put that on, you had a electric suit that you put on, which came down over everything. And then after you put on your electric suit, you had flight jackets that you had. And then after you put on your flight jackets, you had your helmet and your oxygen mask. And then after that, you had the flight jacket. Then you had a parachute harness, and after the parachute harness, they'd give you flak jackets, which you would wear over the target area, which were like a big chest protector, Empire's chest protector. They weighed about 40 pounds, so they're heavy, and so you could hardly move by the time you had all this gear on, and you were plugged into the electrical outlet for your flying suit, which kept you warm. And you had gloves, of course, silk gloves, and then you had the boots and everything else. Oh, and plus the fact you had a 45 caliber revolver you carried in case you were shot down, plus K rations in the pocket of your flight suit in case you needed food after you were shot down and weren't captured. I mean, and maps of where you were. You had everything. When you get up in the air, and the first thing you did was fly in formation, you'd circle the base, and you were given destination points where you'd meet the other squadrons that were taking off from not only your group but other groups, and you would fly at a certain altitude and have a big formation where the whole wing would be spread out all over the sky, and then you'd start out across the channel. Once they'd finished circling and everybody would come up. There were 14 air bases in the 2nd Air Division, and the planes would come up and they'd all congregate at this one place and then get in one big formation and then start across together. I remember most, I think, of the 2nd or 3rd mission more than the 1st mission. I think the 1st mission was relatively uneventful. That mission we went to Magdeburg, which is outside of Berlin. I think it's a town south of Berlin. And we got hit with flak. And, we survived and everything, but we came back with a little battle damage on the plane. So that was the first real encounter we'd had with the enemy. Well, one of the problems when you fly through flak, once you hit the IP and head toward the target, there's no deviation. You couldn't take evasive action of any kind or go up or down. You had to go straight and level because the bombardier had taken over the plane to drop the bomb. So that was when you were most vulnerable, because you might be flying directly into a whole bunch of black puffs of flak, whereas before the IP you might elevate or go down or something, but once you're on the bomb run, you had to go right through it till you dropped your bombs. At that time, we'd get part-way escorts sometime. In other words, because of the fuel constraints on the fighter planes, they could only maybe accompany us a third or 2/3 of the way into the target area, depending upon how far away the target. And Magdeburg was a fairly long run. It was near Berlin, which was a lot longer than many of the missions. The people who flew in 1942 and 43 had it much worse than we did, because they didn't have the protection, and the casualties were much more severe for people who flew during that time than when I flew.
What would be one of the most memorable missions you can remember?
At Arnhem, well, we were dropping supplies. This came in early September when the Allies were trying to drop troops behind the enemy lines in Holland. Our assignment then was to drop supplies to the paratroopers and to the people flying in on the glider troops. So we were flying low altitude at about 500 feet approximately. And it was a beautiful day. I remember the day was a perfect day, and flying over Holland at low level. And then in front of us were all the troop carriers carrying the paratroopers and the gliders and everything else. Because we had to drop things to them. We were starting to push all these boxes and crates and everything out of the plane for the troops down below. It was mostly, they took the ball, there was no ball turret. We pushed it down right through the ball. And that was about well, not quite as big around as this table here. But that's where most of it was. They may have had a few in the bomb bay too. I don't remember the bomb bay having, but it was mostly in the waist, and the waist gunners and myself and the flight engineer. There were like four of us who were pushing boxes and bags and everything you could think of out as fast as you could when we got to the target area. And the thing I remember most is we took a direct hit. You'd hear all the machine gun, you'd hear fire, but you didn't know whether it was from friendly foe or enemy foe or anything. And we took a hit. I don't know if it was an 88 millimeter or a cannon, but anyway, came up about this far from where we were standing in the waist, and fortunately didn't explode. It went right through the plane and tore a hole about this big around from the bottom where it went right up. It happened so fast, you don't know what happened. And then we lost an engine. We got hit by again enemy fire with an engine on one side, and then we lost another engine. So we had to. We never made it back to the base. We had to go back, limp back by ourselves, and land at a British air base because we couldn't get back to our own air base. And then, but fortunately, no one was hurt. But that was, I would say, the most memorable flight.
When did you start taking on enemy fire? Was that after you guys dropped the supplies, or during, or?
No, it was right during, because we were such low level they could fire from the ground. They weren't fighter planes. These were all ground fire that was coming up, because we wanted to get out as fast as we could and get the hell out of there. You were too close. You couldn't jump out with a parachute. There wasn't enough space between you and the ground.
For an open bar, they figured you're going to drink 20.
We used to see a lot of the glider things that had crashed or nosedived over, and everything was chaos on the ground. We saw fighter planes, and we saw planes go down. Yeah, we did. Yeah, you'd see them coming in, down, swooping down. People say, well, did you shoot any down? Well, if a fighter was hit, you really weren't quite sure whether it was your bullet or the waist gunner's bullet. And everybody in the floor firing at the same time. So, I mean, you might have a good idea, but the speed with everybody going in different directions, it was very, very quick. The most popular one, the ones at that time that was more Me-109s, Messerschmitt 109s, and Focke-Wulf 190s. Those were the two primary German fighters that we encountered.
Now, did you ever witness any other bombers going down, getting shot down? Oh, did you?
At least the ones I saw. In many cases, it was sort of a slow death. I mean, they'd get hit and smoke would come out of an engine or wherever it was, and then all of a sudden they'd start to go off and then gradually kind of go down slowly like this. There were very few instantaneous explosions or anything like that. It was or they'd come out and then they'd start to spin, or sometimes like if a wing was shot out or something like that. It would be a little more dramatic, but in most cases it was kind of and you'd always look for parachutes, hopefully that indicate some people got out before it crashed. we lost our tail gunner after the 15th mission. He was transferred, I don't know why, to the 15th Air Force in Italy, and then he was later shot down and captured in January of 1945 and had a very severe case of frostbite. And after he was discharged, he eventually lost his leg and died later. But that didn't happen while he was flying with us. Everyone wore electric suits, and you plugged it in right to where you were stationed in the plane.
No, I mean, but I think that's
You say with the gloves and everything else, but it was cold. You needed it
this many
because
people in this size square footage is good or bad.
then when you had to walk around, like open the bomb bay doors, if you're going from the front of the plane into the waist, and the bomb bay doors are open, you have a little catwalk about this wide that you sneak along to go from the front of the plane into the waist back in here. And then sometimes a bomb would get stuck in the bomb bay, wouldn't be released when you were over the target. Then you'd have to kick it out before you got back to the base. They didn't care where they kicked it, so you never knew where that bomb was going to go. The thing would be this: you'd be up like at 4 o'clock in the morning, and you'd get back from the mission, depending upon where you went, between I would say between 2:30 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'd get back, and then you'd have a briefing. They'd give you a shot of brandy or something, and then someone would come in and they'd brief the crew members, asking them all the same type of things. How was the fire? How was the visibility? A lot of the things the radio operator had sent back. That would last maybe a half an hour or so. And then by now it's like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So you'd go back to the hut, meaning you take off all your gear. And then by 5:30 you were on the way to the mess hall for a lousy supper. And then by 6:30 we'll say you were done with supper, and they had a big Red Cross room, entertainment hall. I'm trying to think what they call it, like where everybody, a social club. It was like a club, a Red Cross club, where you would go, and by this time it might be 7:15 or something like that, and they had and you'd go in there and they'd serve soft drinks. People would be sitting around, and the Red Cross girls would, come up and want to know if you wanted to ride home, or they were very friendly and nice. Sometimes they had music, but usually about 9 o'clock you were on your way back to the hut. And then sometimes you'd play cards. I would say you'd play a lot of poker, like on days you didn't fly. And there were a lot of days you didn't fly, so during the daytime there'd be big poker games and card playing, and that was a big thing in your spare time. Not too much at nighttime because you always had to go to bed early, but there were plenty of times during the day where you had nothing on the schedule, so that was a big thing, I would think. On the Christmas Day, on the Battle of the Bulge, that was when the Germans invaded the Ardennes. That was on December 16th. And there were like 9 days where there wasn't a plane that could get off the ground because the weather was so bad. And this was in northern France and England and everything. So this is when the Germans had their big push, because they didn't have to worry about any air cover as far as we were concerned. But I think I'm not sure it was December 24th or 25th. Finally, it was a beautiful day. And every plane in the 8th Air Force, every fighter plane, there were more planes in the air that day than any time I ever saw in my life. There must have been at least 2,000 bombers, plus fighter groups from France, from every place in England, the RAF. I mean, everybody who could fly was in the air that day. And so I remember that, because I remember they commented all the rumble, they'd heard the rumble from the planes up above, and the noise would have been humongous. They're just all over every place. So that was a very spectacular day. It was either our last mission or next to last mission that we flew, so that was another thing that made it memorable. Mail call was a very important part of the day, to get mail from home and packages. You were always writing away. I remember I was writing away for things like candy bars. Cigarettes were 5 cents a pack at that time, and so if you smoked, why, of course you could buy them for 5 cents a pack at and they were in short supply. Back in the home front, we could get them cheaper at the air base than the people back in the home, but we used to send away for, incidental little things like candy or silk scarf, because silk, I'm trying to think, things that were scarce over there. Because when you go to town, if you had something silk and you had some girlfriend, they always loved to give like a scarf, a flying scarf, or to give something away as a gift, but that kind of thing. Incidentals.
Yeah.
But the mail was very big. And at that time you had V-mail. You were sending, a lot of your letters were going by V-mail, what they call V-mail. And all your letters were censored supposedly before they were mailed out to the States. So you had to be careful not to divulge what targets you were bombing or give out secret information the enemy might want.
Now, what did you do after your 35th mission?
After the mission, they sent us, but we were originally going to go to Japan, but then they changed their mind, fortunately, when we got back. So I was sent to about 3 different bases after we got through at Atlantic City. I don't think they knew what they were going to do. They were going to make us instructors. That's what they were going to do. And but every time we arrived at a base, they weren't ready for us. I moved to about 3 bases, and each time I moved, we had nothing to do, and we were on these lousy troop trains in the middle of summer in July of '45, and I ended up at Dayton, Ohio, at Wright Field. And I ended up in the orderly room with another fellow, and at that time they were awarding the discharge based on the number of points you had accumulated during the service. And we were in charge of determining who was getting discharged and so forth. So we had our names up there right at day 1 to be discharged. So on the very first day they set it up as a discharge because it was the first day they had generals and everything else. They'd call out our names and we'd walk up with the general, come up and shake our hands, congratulations. That was the end of my tour of duty.